Okay, it's Thursday. I should write this stuff down and be more prepared. It is Thursday. It's January 22nd. Oh,
2015.
all right, thank you. Uh, this is Random Thoughts with Random Excess and Dutch. I'm Random Excess. This is my ever-present partner, Dutch, Shane Schultz from Serenely Speaking. You'll also see him on the Arisen Strength motivational podcast, radio show soon to be. Exciting news with that. You should look it up. But Shane is partnering up with the JGF, which is the Joey Giggles Family Foundation, and they're going to go wide. They're going to go big. It's going to be something that's all been happening just in the last week. So that's all very exciting. And we've been talking with Shane about his projects and stuff. So this is all very exciting news there. So that's Thursday, January 22nd, 2015. Tonight's episode, calling it Locally Connected. Well, that's a strange word, but strange title. But I'm going to go ahead with it. Okay, now put the camera back on me, because now that I understand how this stuff works a little bit more. This is, of course, Random Thoughts with Random Excess, and then I forgot to angle this so that you could see how many followers we had on the likes we had on the page. Yesterday was 26. Today it's still 26. So talk to your friends, get a like the Facebook page, Random Thoughts with Random Excess. Let's see if we can get that number up to 27. I got big goals there. At least my perception would be that we're getting popular if that number starts going up. Why did I mention perception? Because perception is what this is all about, right? One of the things I want to talk about is I don't want to just be reporting news stories. I don't want to be just hashing out, regurgitating details from news stories that you could read on your own. I want to talk about how these news stories make me think and feel. I want to get some feedback from Shane about sometimes how I think and feel, and also find out how he thinks and feel. I want you to think about how you think and feel, because that gives us insight into our perspective, our perception. Whatever's happening out in the real world is important. It's definitely really important. The universe is always talking. It's always telling the truth. That's extremely important. But that's going to get filtered eventually through our perspective. It triggers emotional thoughts. It triggers reasonable thoughts. We start doing a lot of things going on inside the head. And then, perception is reality. That's really what it comes down to. Perception is reality, and we have to challenge that sometimes. Challenge your perspective. How do I challenge my perspective? I use mindfulness and humility help me challenge my perspective. And what do I mean by those things? Mindfulness, people will say, be present, be in the moment. Experience the moment. Don't be distracted by the past. Don't be distracted by the future. Be present in the moment. Be open-minded. Be listening. That's mindfulness. And then this humility. At least the way I use the word humility is this thing about where I recognize that my perception is flawed, that I don't see everything. I have flawed perspective. I have distorted thoughts, so that even as I'm processing information and I'm having very real emotional reactions and I'm having very real thoughts about what's happening, I have to recognize at all times that they may not be appropriate for the given situation. That yes, in my head they are, because if they're happening in my head and perception is reality, but my humility is that part of me that says, hold on. You might have to process this again. You might want to think about things differently. You might want to look at things differently. You want to make sure that you're sober next time when you're doing this. Take your meds, Wayne. You need to take your meds. All those kind of things have to feed into it, because I want to make sure I have clarity of thought. I have stability of emotion. I want to make sure that I'm seeing things as they are. So when I'm looking at a complex event unfolding, I'm not too focused on one little thing. I want to make sure that I'm seeing the whole picture, and I'm open to some things that may seem insignificant at first glance, but that may actually be important. So I have to be open to all that. So I have to kind of train myself a little bit, and I have to be willing to sort of shift my perspective sometimes. Some things that I think are extremely important might be insignificant in this situation. So perspective is really important. And eventually, because like I said, it all filters in. It all happens in the head, and then in the head, perception is reality. And then at that point, it doesn't really matter what the reality of the situation is. At this point, you're off and running, and you're going to have an action. You're going to do something. Eventually, that emotional side of your head is going to win out. It's going to say, do something. Or maybe the thought side, the reasonable side, might stop you from doing it. But something's going to happen, and there's going to be a consequence, and you're going to have to own that consequence. And at the end of the day, it's not going to matter what really happened out there and outside of you. it's going to come back. You're going to have to own it inside. It's what you did inside that's really kind of going to be the real important thing. And that's the things that you have to question is what's really happening and how can I make sure that I'm seeing things that are really happening. One of the things that I talked about before is the lazy brain. Right, Shane? And maybe I hadn't talked about it much before, but it is kind of the topic of the day for the last couple of days. But your brain is lazy. What worries it is lazy is it uses up so much energy, so much oxygen. It's already a very busy place in your head. It doesn't need to be extra busy, so it tries to find shortcuts. It tries to save some energy. It tries to ease things down. One of the real obvious ways that this is true is you don't have any. There's two here. You don't have any big blind spots in the middle of your eyes. You got your optic nerve. It's this huge nerve right in the center of your eye, right in the center in each eye. You should have two big blind spots. You don't even see them. It's all filled in. How's that possible? It's because the brain is lazy. Well, maybe the brain's smart or something. But it's figured out a way to sort of fill that in. It's like whatever you saw there last time, the eye moves around. The other place where the brain does things kind of fools you is your nose. This is I just saw this recently. It's something I've seen many, many times, but I saw it again yesterday. It reminded me of it. Your nose is right in the middle of your field of view. I mean, you can see your nose perfectly. You get this giant nose sitting right there, and your brain ignores it. I mean, think about that. You're looking at, do you see your nose? I mean, you can kind of, you almost hurt your eyes if you're trying to look cross-eyed. But put your finger on your nose. Why can you not see that nose? It's right. It's like the brain goes out of it. It's like, look, that's a nose. It's just there all the time. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. It disappears. The nose, your brain considers it unimportant, and it ignores it. It's almost like a form of what's called inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness. And there's something that's out there happening in your field of view that your brain chooses to ignore. Why would I mention that? Well, here we go. There's psychologists are using Monty Python to demonstrate inattentional blindness. There's this psychologist from England, Richard Wiseman. He's a magician, psychologist, kind of a funny little guy. You see him on the internet a lot. I see him on the internet a lot. But you may have seen his gorilla video. What? The gorilla video? He has this little video where he demonstrates this, where he has two basketball teams, one dressed in all white uniforms, one dressed in all black uniforms, and and they're not really playing a game of basketball. What they're doing is they each have a basketball. Each group of people has a basketball, and they're passing it back and forth amongst themselves. So the white team dressed in white is passing the basketball amongst themselves, and the team dressed in black is passing the ball amongst themselves. And then he asks the question, can you count how many times the team in white passes the basketball? And then you watch the short video. It's a 2-minute video or something. And 19 times, I don't know, some number. But then after it's done, it said, did you notice the gorilla? Notice the gorilla? You watch the video again. About halfway through the gorilla, very obvious, a person in a gorilla suit walks out, gets in the middle of the frame, starts beating the chest, doing gorilla moves, and then walks off the other side of the frame. So they walk all the way across the thing and beating the chest in the middle, and you're like, no, that did not happen. And you watch it, oh yeah, it really did happen. It's inattentional blindness. Your brain has decided it's going to focus on looking at the white team count things, so it kind of blocks everything else out. You're just blind to it. Your brain has decided what it considers important. That's sort of the perspective part. It's made some sort of decision beforehand, and that affects your perception. You don't see the gorilla that comes out and beats on his chest. And this is a very popular video. It's been out for many years on the internet, and if you haven't seen it, definitely look at it. Gorilla basketball. You'll see it. The Monty Python sketch is a variation of that. The Monty Python sketch, which was aired probably back in the 70s when Monty Python was on, has some guys sitting around, World War II veterans, sitting around having a conversation. And in the sketch, in the background of the sketch, there's 3 people. There's a nun, a Viking, and I probably should have figured out. I should have looked again to see what the third one was. But another person is completely out of place for the image. But in the sketch, you kind of don't really notice it. And they did this experiment in front of a live audience, and they kind of reproduced the replicated the skit and had the cast of characters in the back, and your brain just chooses to ignore it, even as out of place and it's really out of place. You think the brain might pick up on the fact that it's out of place, but it falls into that sort of category of unexpected, and the brain's not expecting anything unexpected when you're on alert. But you're kind of lulled into this conversation here. You miss it, and then the brain just completely ignores all this other stuff. It's kind of a interesting. I don't know, to me, it's interesting. So I don't know. Shane, does that make you think of anything so far? We're talking about perception, lazy brain, inattentional blindness, gorillas, noses.
I don't even know where to begin. I'm definitely blinded by my perception at times because I get so focused on what it is that I'm thinking about to where all outside factors are kind of just that. They're outside of my focus and not outside of my vision. So I guess that would be called, another way of saying it would be tunnel vision in a way. I have seen the video in regards to the gorilla. It did get me for a bit, and it goes to show that how much that we miss, that's out there, and because of what we kind of focus on, and I think we've touched on this before. We don't use near the capacity of our brain. And with that being the case, with it using, around at the very most 10%, we kind of focus on one thing and we stay there. So the outside factors and the outside perceptions and point of views are, sometimes just like that. They're on the outside and looking in, and it takes a courage for somebody to take another perception, take another point of view into their realm, into their sight, that they can actually, consider. And so I think that this is it's something that I try to work on. I try to be open, and I try to not be on one single thought that my way is the only way.
Yeah, that's I think that's what I was talking about with humility. That's kind of like my humility, at least my perception of humility. But where else does perception kind of come up, and where can it help us? I mean, obviously you can see it might lead to mental illness. We talked about inappropriate thought or inappropriate emotional responses to triggers. Mental illness kind of manifests itself that way. Another place is in addiction, and this is something we've talked about here. I'm a recovering addict. Shane, you're a recovering addict. Today for me, 1,406 days. That was actually yesterday's count. So if I make it through the day, it'll go 1,407. But today my count is 1,406. That's days sober. Working up there one day at a time. That's perception. Got to focus on just today. I can't worry about anything else. So this headline here was, I saw this today in Huffington Post by a guy, Johan Hari, but it's like the likely cause of addiction has been discovered. And he kind of goes off the page there. You have to trust me, that's what the word says. And it's not what you think. And when you read the article, which I'll challenge you to go read the article, but the highlight is that the addiction is not so much the chemical addiction that gets you hooked. It's not like that a person just comes in, tries it, and then they're hooked. But that there's these precursors. There's a predisposition to becoming addictive. And there's also a sort of a post disposition to help you get off the addiction, and that's being connected to other people. It talks, the article here, and the guy actually wrote a book. He went off, he did a whole journey, but he talks about the effect of isolation on addiction, that feeling of being disconnected, of your voice not being heard, and you turn to the drugs. because the drug then, or the addiction, alcohol, could be gambling, could be any other thing, that becomes your friend. That becomes something that responds to you. That becomes something that you feel like there's some reciprocity. You have a little bit of control in your life. So it's a control thing, but it's a little bit deeper than control. It's a call and response. It's like, oh, I feel this way, I want this, and then it happens, kind of thing. Oh, I want a drink, and then I get the drink. There's some sort of back and forth in that sense, that gives you that sense of connection. And the one thing I thought was really interesting, he talks about there's the rat experiment that was popular, and they actually made the commercials in the 70s or 80s where they showed the rat in the cage, and there was a bottle of water, the water dish, and a cocaine-laced water dish, and the rat would drink from the cocaine-laced water dish until it died, and it would ignore the other water. Just like, oh, look at the addiction here, until another person looked at it and said, well, you got a rat in a cage with nothing else in the cage. The rat is completely isolated. It's not connected to its environment. It's not connected to other rats. And so he basically redid the experiment, but he built a rat city or a rat carnival or a fun house for rats. And there's multicolored balls and wheels and ramps and other rats. And then he had the water dishes. And in those experiments, the rats were not significantly addicted to the cocaine. They would try it, okay, and then they would drink the one that was not laced, and that was the one they drank from, and it was kind of an interesting. And then the article goes in and talks a lot more about it. The reason I bring it up about perception is in that first experiment, yes, the rat was isolated. That's an objective statement. It was in a bare cage, and the rat knew it. And in the second one, the rat was in this cage where there was lots of things around it, and the rat knew it. And so the rats had pretty clear perception, so they were able to understand their situations a little better. But as I was talking about before, perception happens in the brain. There's perspective, and there's thoughts, emotions, and creates this perception. It becomes a model for reality, and that's what's real for you. It's not if you're actually in a cage. It's not if you're actually isolated. It's a difference between being experiencing solitude versus loneliness, or solitude versus isolation. You can be in these situations, but if your perception is that you're not there, then you're not subject to it. If you're in the active cage, but if you still feel isolated from the crowd, removed from the crowd, you can still be in you have that same predisposition for addiction. That it's not that you have to be. That if you're in a terrible situation, you're going to be addicted, or if you're in a great situation, you're not going to be addicted. It's going to be your perception, which is going to be a combination of your perspective and then your clarity of thought and your emotional stability, all working together to create a perception. And that perception is something that we can challenge. So part of the way we can challenge is we can seek to be actively connected, but we can also seek to make sure that we are connected. If you're feeling isolated, ask the question, am I really isolated? Are there people trying to connect to me, and for some reason I've not been receiving that connection? I haven't been connecting back, because there might be a reason why you weren't noticing it, because we get ourselves in these all kinds of positions, and it's that inattentional blindness. We may not notice what's right in front of our face, right there in front of our face, and we may not even see it. The brain has blocked it out, and it's hard to see things that your brain has blocked out. You got to try and find a way to realize that, yes, am I being connected? And part of it is being active, get out, connecting, making sure that you are connected, and putting yourself in a situation where you can sort of fight your addiction, and not just your addiction. And of course, as I'm just talking about here, but just in life, happiness, joy. I think as humans, we're happier when we're connected to the universe. We're connected to each other. We're connected to pets. We're connected to our belongings. There's things that can connect us, and when we feel disconnected, isolated, the drug is that thing that will connect, or the addiction is something that we can connect to. And boy, we just love to be connected. I don't know. Did you have any sort of thoughts on addiction, Shane, on this?
Oh boy. I read the article, and I got to tell you, I wasn't altogether like, oh, he just found something that I didn't know. I mean, the 12-step programs that are out there are based off of this concept, really. when it comes to especially addiction, I mean, to be connected is a distraction from that addiction. So in order to be able to pull away from something, you definitely have a better chance if you're distracted. And being connected is like a distraction. I mean, that I was in the situation where um, I had a relationship with somebody that recently who drove me absolutely crazy to the point as to where if I wasn't going through the ceiling, I wanted to put him through the ceiling. That type of thing. And and this was for a long period of time. When I say a long period of time, it was about a year or so. And you know, I was, without question, I was ultimately distracted by this relationship that I had with this particular individual. And and I didn't realize how much distracted I was until I no longer had to deal with that individual. And then all of a sudden, whoa, I had to deal with the real issues that were going on in my life and in my head and so forth. So it was definitely even adverse distractions or adverse relationships are distractions. And that was a lesson to me, to be quite honest with you, because it's like when that relationship finally ended in the way that it did, I was surprised that I wasn't automatically saying, yes, I'm feeling better, and yes, I can do things, and I can move on from this deal, and I can, the sky's the limit. I did the exact opposite. I mean, I was really centered in on myself to where, oh, here's where the real problem was, and so, I mean, although it's a nice article and everything, I appreciate where he's coming from. I just didn't see where it was that much different than the concepts that a lot of people are very aware of in the 12-step program.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I was a little questioning his choice of title of, this new actual cause discovered. But I did like the article because it was kind of reinforced that sense that, hey, this stuff's important.
Absolutely did.
And when you're talking about addiction, sometimes it's trying to find the right words, trying to find the right approach, trying to frame the argument, or nothing's harder in the world than trying to reach somebody who's stuck in addiction. Because addiction is one of those things, you got to want the help. You've got to want to connect. You got to want to break that isolation and not just say the words that you want to do it, but you have to feel it inside that you want to do it. And we get so used to being isolated and disconnected, and that we're not even real sure what it means to want to reconnect again. We can say the words and we know that we want to do it, but you have to feel it, and it's really, really hard to jumpstart that feeling, because that's a perspective thing.
It's almost like you're constricted. It's like if you've got a stick with a string attached to it or a rope attached to it, the faster that you go, the tighter it goes. And that's what it feels like when I'm in my addiction, is that it's tight. There's nothing that's getting in, and it's just me and my addiction, which is the worst thing in the world, because it just is a rope-a-dope. But if you take that same concept, that stick and that rope, and you do it slow into a looping way, well, then it's not as conformed, it's not as constricting, and so it allows factors to be involved, and it's distracted from being tight. And I think it's the same thing with fellowship in a 12-step program, is it allows you to not be all tight and wound up on it.
So I guess the lesson there was just, if you're feeling just isolated, one of the things is seek connection. Double check that you are being connected. And look for those. Look for that nose that's really obvious. That's right there, and really the opportunity to look for those supports. Another happened to be also on Huffington Post today. The last article was by, the guy's name was Johan Hari. This one also on Huffington Post is Hari Pulapapka, so the Hari plant. But this is actually somebody I know. I went to graduate school with Hari Pulapapka. He's a math professor and a chef, classically trained chef or whatever, cordon bleu trained. I don't know, whatever where he went to school. He's a trained chef, has a restaurant down in Florida, and he writes this article from the Ivory Tower kitchen. So the Ivory Tower is reference to his his job as a professor. Kitchen, and you can't see the whole title, but you can trust me what the words say. It's like food advocacy in isolation is not sustainable. And again, it's that connection to the isolation. We can't do things in isolation. And in this case, he's talking about food advocacy, which and it has the word sustainable too. There's a little play going on there, because food advocacy, one of the things is to make it local and sustainable. We want sustainable food programs. We don't want to rely on these giant grids where we're actually using up resources, and but local and sustainable. But in order to be local and sustainable and to advocate for these things, you can't operate in isolation. And the isolation is not just isolation of yourself; it's isolation of the group that you're working with. If you put together an advocacy group, but you guys individually aren't out there connecting and networking individually, throwing out tendrils, connecting your advocacy to the outside world, then you're not really helping. I mean, it becomes these aren't his words now. This is what it made me think. But it becomes like mental masturbation. It's just people sitting around, solving the world's problems and not doing anything. You have to have your little group where you guys decide what you're going to do, but then you sort of individually or in smaller groups have to reach out and actually be enacting those changes and be promoting those changes and getting people to sort of pay it forward kind of thing, so that when you come back to your little advocacy group, you can talk about what you're doing, what you're working on. So you have the hub and spoke sort of philosophy where you have to branch out, and then if each level can branch out, then things can spread. But the best ideas in the world, if they're not shared beyond the group that sort of forms them, then they just die. It's evolution. It requires spreading. The greatest idea in the world, if it doesn't spread beyond the people who have the idea, it's a terrible idea. It's not sustainable. It just doesn't survive. So that's kind of what this article made me think. Of course, it's in there too, but it's also a shout out for a buddy of mine. He writes this. I don't know how often it comes out. It's whenever he gets around to it, monthly, something like that. But it's from the Ivory Tower Kitchen. Hari Pulapapka. And if you're down in Florida, check out his restaurant, Crest Restaurant in DeLand. It's one of the best restaurants in Central Florida. And that's just not me saying that. It's actually highly accredited, and it's trust me when I say it's a great restaurant. Well, don't trust me because I've never been there, but from what I've read and everybody I've talked to, and I know people who have eaten there, and people whose opinions I trust and value, they all say that and I've eaten at great restaurants, and so I could almost tell from the pictures, like, oh yeah, that looks great. But I'll support his restaurant even without having been there myself. Maybe he'll throw me a free meal one time. Say, when you're here, Wayne, I'll hook you up. We'll see. Anything's possible. But so that was really kind of about perception, isolation, addiction, and advocacy, whether it's food advocacy or any other kind of advocacy. Those are important things to consider. To fight that isolation, fight the perception of isolation, fight the addiction, fight the mental health, work on the perspective, work on the thoughts, the emotions, and we can beat this. And I think we can. Whatever we want to beat, we can connect with the universe. And that's I talked about that yesterday. Connecting with the universe. That's the ultimate goal. Make me one with everything. When I'm actually really connected to the universe, that's where I find true peace. It's like I'm hearing what the universe is saying. It's not being distorted. I'm not distorting it. I'm getting exactly what it's supposed to be. I'm returning back to the womb, so to speak. It's a very peaceful thing. So that's how I kind of want to end the show, except for do the Twitter update. You can follow us on Twitter. That's at Random Access, and I'm not even sure what this is now. You can hashtag us at the RTWRE. That's Random Thoughts with Random Excess. Little tweets pop up. We have our followers. What was the count yesterday? It was it was 560 yesterday. Now 960 yesterday. Now it's 958. So we're doing good. We're going backwards. So people come and go every day. I'd like to see that number go up. So give us a call on the feedback line. That's in the U.S. and Canada, 1-5-189-666-175. 3 to 5 on the weekends, 3 to 4 during the week, every night, 11 to midnight after the show. And say goodnight, Shane.
Good night, Shane.